Welcome to Horizons Person to Person podcast. My name is Flutter, and we're with Habitor today, and we will be discussing conflict resolution. So, what aspects of conflict resolution do you find the most beneficial?
Well, the goal of conflict resolution is to resolve conflict. So hopefully, ideally, the parties involved are going to come to an agreement that makes everybody happy. So for me, when we talk about conflict resolution, my background is more, in the workplace, which is a structured environment. So it's a lot easier to handle it. There's a lot less questions about, what the procedure is because it's written down. Whereas, in a personal situation or a social situation, you don't really have those rules or those guidelines that are laid out. So for me, there are just a kind of a few items that I like to keep in mind when I'm dealing with conflict, whether that's with a stranger or someone at work or my wife or whoever. If we have a disagreement, we basically need to be on the same page about how we're going to fight it out. And I think that's really the most important thing, because it's okay to disagree. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be right. But getting there and getting to that resolution that you're looking for, you need to do so in such a way that's respectful of the people around you, and it's important to make sure that everybody is operating under the same assumptions.
You bring up an interesting point with world point of view, because we're all working under basic assumptions, and everyone's point of view is a little different. So if someone is having a conflict and they're not sure how to bring the situation to the other person, and they don't want to upset the other person either in bringing up the situation, what's some of the key points that you like to mention to people on how to approach a difficult topic?
Right. Well, of course, if this is in a work environment, hopefully you have a manager or HR or someone that you trust at work, where you can, in a perfect world, because unfortunately it's not always the case, but in a perfect world, you have someone that you can who has some sort of authority to handle those situations, help mediate that. But outside of that, you kind of have to weigh, if you're in a situation where you feel uncomfortable bringing up a topic with a friend, let's say. I guess my first question would be, why are you uncomfortable? Do you think that they're going to react poorly? Do you worry about how they're going to think of you for bringing it up? Do you feel like it's a small issue that's kind of bothering you, but you don't want to make it seem like a big issue? And for me, step one is it something that I feel strongly enough about to have a conflict over? And again, I use the word conflict. That word, I think, has negative connotations, but for our purposes, just a disagreement. Not necessarily a right or wrong, or maybe there is, but it's not a negative thing to be in conflict with somebody else or to disagree with somebody else. But how you go about it is what, I think what makes that experience positive or negative. So then step two is that, if what's keeping you from talking to them about it is you feel that they are going to react poorly, or you feel like you are going to be negatively impacted for bringing it up, for rocking the boat, I would honestly just take your time and think about what you want to say, how you want to say it, what's important, what are your, kind of key points, kind of go over it in your head. and for me, at least in my personal life, that's really helped when I've had to have difficult conversations, you know, with friends of mine.
Right.
I was in a situation where a friend's wife had made some inappropriate comments towards me when he wasn't there.
Ooh.
And I was in a situation where I had to tell him because that, you know, that's the right thing to do in that situation.
Right.
Um, and it's not an easy conversation to have. And it's certainly a situation where I was afraid that he was going to be angry with me, even
Right.
though, you know, objectively I hadn't really done anything wrong. But it's still a very high stress situation.
Right.
Um, so I took my time and I planned out where we were going to talk. I planned what we
Mhm.
were going to have to drink while he was there. I planned what we were going to,
Wow.
you know, what we, you
Yeah.
know, what time and all that. And having that structure, even though what I was planning didn't really have much of an impact on the conversation itself,
Hmm.
having that structure in place, even in the back of my head, having that plan helped make it easier to have that conversation because I didn't feel like I was just going in blind. I didn't feel like I was operating off of instinct. I knew kind of
Hmm.
what I was getting into.
That's wonderful.
Um,
It's
yeah, go ahead.
one of the things I like to bring up with conflict resolution and just things that we don't always agree upon is looking at it from the other person's point of view. Do you find that looking at
Yeah,
things from their
absolutely.
point of view is helpful?
Well, like I said, I think that there are certain axioms that you need to follow, and that I think that's kind of innate to most people. I think
Hmm.
that, you know, let's say you and I are having a disagreement. I think that we would both assume that we're both being honest with each other, right?
Right.
That's the hope in a fair fight, in a
Hmm.
situation where I mean, and you know, this leads directly into part two, that we want a resolution. I mean, you know, you hear the old joke is, you know, the things about, you know, pigs rolling around in the mud is that wrestling a
Hmm.
pig is in the mud is that you figure out that they like it, you know. So
Right.
you have folks who argue in bad faith because they like to argue and they don't care about the resolution. They don't want a resolution. They just want to fight for whatever reason. Um, so I think that, you know, a, that we're being real with the other person. B,
Hmm.
that we want to have a resolution. And then C is exactly what you said, is making that effort. You know, not only are we being honest, not only are we trying to come to a resolution, but we are both making an effort to understand the other person and to communicate with
Right.
each other. And if I think that if one party isn't holding themselves to those three tenets, then it's impossible. It's extremely unlikely that you're going to come to a satisfactory conclusion, um, when you're having that disagreement. Because if
Have
I'm
you?
lying to you, yeah,
Right.
go ahead.
Oh no, keep going.
You know, if I'm lying to you, you don't know what
Right.
I actually want. You don't know if I actually do want, you know, conflict resolution.
Right.
And, you know, if we're arguing, you know, let's say it's about directions to get to, you know, the local store, and
Hmm.
I'm just straight up giving you the wrong directions. I mean, in that interaction, the conflict there is that we're lost, and that you're assuming that I'm going to be honest with you, that I want us to get to the store, and, you know, that I'm understanding that you're frustrated that we're lost. But if I'm just lying to you, then that's not going to get us to a resolution that's going to make anybody happy,
Right.
except for maybe me, if I have some sick love for getting people lost.
You know,
But that's not a positive outcome. You know, that's not what the goal
yeah.
is.
No, I believe me, I totally understand that, especially with the giving of the directions. My father was
Yeah.
notorious for not even wanting to stop to ask for directions, and I remember hating going anywhere with him in the car. So when you brought that up, I'm like, oh God, yeah, yeah.
Well,
I mean, there's just
in
no,
that situation, yeah, in that situation, the conflict is that you guys are lost,
yeah,
and he's unwilling to participate in coming to that's number two. He's not willing to, he's not trying to get to a resolution because he's
Right.
not willing to try anything other than wander,
Yeah.
and that's, that's a really low stakes example, I think, but
Yeah.
it's a perfect example of how those kind of come into play, those ideas.
Do you find that there are certain personalities that you have an easier time working with? Some people will say, "Oh, I'm a type A, I'm a type T," and I don't give much credence to the types of personalities, but it does seem like there are some
Right.
people who like just to argue for arguing's sake or like to cause
Yeah.
conflict because. And how do you handle those people, the people that you just know that you're just going to have to, you don't want to
Yeah.
ignore them because you don't want to be rude, but you know that you really can't engage them either. So how do you handle those situations?
Yeah. I'm going to fall back on number one, being honest. If I feel like somebody's not arguing in good faith, if I feel like they are, if I feel like they're arguing for argument's sake, I'm going to be, hey,
Yeah.
listen, I'm trying to come to a resolution here with you. And it feels, I was like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you're playing devil's advocate to play devil's advocate, that it feels
Right.
like that we aren't working together here. How can we do that? How can I get
Right.
back on track with you so that we're both rowing in the same direction, that we're both trying to come to a resolution? And
Yeah.
sometimes that can just be, sometimes they're doing that because that's how they get their kicks. Sometimes they're doing that because they're upset and they're not in a space where they can have a meaningful resolution. They're not able, they're not in a mental state to have that conversation,
Hmm.
which is totally fine. People say like, oh, don't make emotional decisions,
Right.
and I think that that's BS. I think that our decisions need to come from an emotional place. I don't think
Hmm.
we should let our emotions make our decisions for us. Um, because I make decisions all the time about whether or not it's something that's going to make me happy or not. you know,
Right.
that's an emotion. That's not. In the morning when I make breakfast, I don't pour out my exactly 18 grams of whatever, because
Right.
that's not my thing. That's not what makes me happy. I'll pour a box of Lucky Charms or a Raisin Bran, or whatever,
Yeah.
um, because that's what makes me happy.
Right.
So, and a lot of times when people are upset, they don't they don't want to play fair. They want the problem to go away. Um, and I think that a lot of times, that one thing that I think I've struggled with in my own relationships is when I'm fighting with my.
We had a minor technical difficulty which required us to lose a little bit of audio, and we picked up more or less where we left off.
So I think the last thing I was talking about was how, sometimes we can be in a state where we're not able to communicate
Hmm.
properly, and we're not able to kind of follow those three axioms that I was talking about.
Correct.
Um, and one of my struggles personally, when it comes to conflict resolution, is that, when I'm in a fight with my partner or a friend even,
Hmm.
um, and we're both very emotionally charged for whatever reason, it's hard. It's hard for me to walk away from that conversation without a resolution. And I
Right.
think I think that sometimes that's the best thing that you can do, is to give each other that space to cool off, to get to a point where
Hmm.
you can have that conversation. Because, like I said, if I'm following my rules, where I'm being honest, and I want to come to a resolution,
Hmm.
and that I'm trying to see the other person's point of view, then part of that is being honest with myself that I am unable to see the other person's point of view because I'm in a state where I can't come
Hmm.
to a conclusion.
Yeah.
If I'm angry or mad about something, then sometimes I'm just going to be angry or mad about it, and it's
Hmm.
and it's not healthy to try and resolve something when you're in that scenario. If I can jump topics a little bit, same topic, but
Sure.
shift gears a little bit. Uh, the kind of secondary item here that is adjacent to that sort of dynamic where what I've described, we're equals in our
Right.
disagreement. We're just two people who are having a disagreement, person A, person B. It doesn't
Right.
matter who we are. In situations where there is a power dynamic, and again, this is why it's in a work environment, it's nice to have that structure, because if there's a power dynamic of, let's say your manager is cursing at you or something like that,
Right.
hopefully you have a neutral third party, and you have a set of procedures that you follow,
Right.
and that gets resolved in such a way where the power dynamic doesn't impact the conflict resolution. When
Right.
you are in a situation where, and I think about this a lot, just because you hear people say, like, I remember what it was like when I was a teenager, and it was never like, these things were never a big deal. And I just think a lot about when I was a teenager, and I'm like, man, a lot of what I cared about then was pretty dumb, but I cared about it, you
Right.
know? And so in a power dynamic where you have a child and a parent, or a student and a teacher, or, that's something that can make it difficult. That's a big hurdle to overcome sometimes.
Right.
Um, when you're in a position where you feel like you can't disagree, where where no matter what you do, you're not going to come to a mutually agreed upon resolution, because only one person has the decision making power.
Right.
It's the classic, a parent asks their child, do you want a bath or a shower? There's not
Right.
really a choice there. you know
No. Yeah.
yeah.
You get
So
wet one way or the other.
I think that, one of the things that, when you are in a, trying to resolve conflict, and even in a social situation, you might have one person who's the social butterfly, who knows everybody, who's best friends with everybody. And if you're kind of like a friend of a friend in that dynamic, I mean, there is a social imbalance
Oh
there. It's not a
yeah.
formal one. It's not a formal social imbalance, and it's not
Right.
something that, um, it's not something that is necessarily like, well, they have more power than me. Like, you're not going to say that to them.
Right.
But as somebody, if you're in a privileged position or you're in a position of power, it's important when you're trying to resolve conflict and you're trying to, um, when you do get into a disagreement, to internally acknowledge that, and that's part of the empathy that we were talking about. It's part of
Right.
really honing in on, like, seeing it from the other person's perspective. And for when I'm in a position like, and I used to be a soccer coach, when I'm in a position where I've got a kid who is really loud, he's running around, he's causing problems, he's knocking other people's, soccer balls around, I have to ask myself, as the person, that's the conflict. I'm trying to teach a class. He's being disruptive. I have to ask myself, what is going to best resolve this situation? And he may be
Right.
6 years old, but I've found, and it doesn't work for everyone, unfortunately, that a lot of times coming down to their level and, getting on physically, like getting on one knee and making an effort to show, hey, I'm going to talk to you as an equal. You're old enough to understand, like, I'm willing to have a conversation with you,
Right.
and I'm willing to work with you rather than tell you what to do, because that's not
Right.
helpful. He's not, the kid doesn't want to do, if I'm just giving him orders, he doesn't want to do it. He's a kid, he doesn't know any better. He doesn't he doesn't care so much about that he's disrupting the class because he hasn't necessarily developed empathy to the, yet, or
Right.
it
No, of
hasn't
course.
developed it enough. Um, but he does want to, they do want attention. They want, they want to
Mm-hmm.
be heard just as much as any full grown adult, just as many. I mean, babies don't cry because they want to be ignored, like I think
Right.
everybody wants to be heard. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you're in a position of privilege or power, acknowledging that and like making a discernible effort
Mm-hmm.
to level the playing field, even at your own detriment. I mean, you're losing leverage in an, when you're arguing with somebody, you talk about leverage and you talk about your ability to win
Mm-hmm.
an argument. If you're in a position of power, I mean, it's the classic, you do it because I told you to, you know,
Right.
and that's not a positive conflict resolution because it's one person getting what they want, whether the other person wants it or not.
So
Um,
in VR, in Horizon specifically,
yeah,
right now we're pretty much in a kind of a utopian society, because we don't have a whole floodgate open yet. So it hasn't become the dystopia. Well, some would argue it already is, but the point I'm trying to make
yeah,
is, um, I have a vast number of friends, as you do as well. We have mixed circles, and
right,
when new people come in, I'm very consciously aware of how that would look like a clique, like back in high school. So I make
yeah.
sure I try to welcome them in. How do you make sure that when you're doing this, it's perceived properly? Like, it's not like I'm feeling bad for the person. I want them to know that I'm truly there for them.
Yeah, I care about this community. One of my favorite things is to teach people how to do things.
Yep.
If feel free to add me up, ask me questions anytime. I think that you're a very genuine person. I know that you go out of your way to help as many people as you can and to share your love of VR and Horizon.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think that shows in your actions. And I think that you're not like pitying somebody. You're
Right.
not um you're not virtue signaling when you're trying to be inclusive because,
Right.
like I said, like that brings us right back. We assume that we're telling the truth. you know
Right.
that's in a real conversation between
Right.
people, that we're kind of assuming that we're not trying to deceive each other.
Exactly.
um
Like I got here into Horizon, oh goodness, the first week of March, and
yeah,
I had a goal right away. So that helped, and I had a background in
yeah,
computers and that helped. So that's what I do tell people. I'm often saying, I
yeah,
have a background in this. That's why I was able to do this so quickly. And I
yeah,
had the plaza that wasn't inundated yet with children.
yeah,
And that brings us to another interesting topic. I try
yeah,
my hardest to engage appropriately with the kids, letting them know, okay, no, I can't friend you. If there's a group of us
yeah,
going to travel someplace, sure, I'll go with you. But I'm not going to go with a child by myself with them anywhere for safety reasons
yeah,
on all levels. And,
yeah,
but when they're disruptive, it is hard because I personally don't want to admonish them, but I also don't want them to think that they can do what they're doing. And I think that's where my biggest conflict in Horizon is right now, is with not adults, because
yeah,
adults are great here, but how can we better interact with the children? And Paige Dansinger made a comment, and I don't know if you got to see this or not, where she suggested having like an academy for the kids, where we have a space and
I
we
did see that
teach
one.
them
Yeah,
etiquette. Do you think that something like that would be beneficial? Because one of the things I want is for the kids to say, oh my gosh, these adults want to help me in a positive way,
yeah,
and I need to be this way to get that help. But what is your
yeah,
suggestion on that? Because I really want to help and be with these kids and, in a positive way.
yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, like I said, I coach soccer. I've been a swim coach. I've worked with children for years and years, and I love working with kids. The Horizon platform is, I don't think that, I love the idea of like a kids Horizon. I love the idea of a kids academy. I don't think that any I don't think that there are children who will I think that you're not going to catch all the kids in something like that. I just, from a logistical standpoint, convincing them to go to this etiquette academy, or I think that it's important to lead by example. I think that I think it is a big problem. I think it's Facebook's problem. I think that it's unfortunate that we, as adult users, who have come into the beta and who are playing Horizon and creating content for Horizon and are here to build a community, are being put in a position that we were kind of told that we weren't going to be. I mean, there is the terms of service. You need to be, I believe it's 14 years of age. I think that for a long time, if it's changed, but for a long time, it was, you had to be at least 18 to be in the beta. And I think that there are children that I've met in Horizon that have been extremely well behaved, that have been extremely friendly, who are here to learn, who are here to build in Horizon. I think that I've seen a lot of children who are here to run around and let off some energy, and don't, like I said, it's not that they're bad kids. It's not that they're bad people. It's that they haven't yet developed the level of empathy or awareness or what etiquette or whatever you want to call it, to always be on their best behavior. And they shouldn't have to be. They're children. They shouldn't be in a position where, I mean, that's another, it's not on the kids to behave like adults. Like, that's not their job,
right.
And at the same time, it shouldn't be on the adults to monitor the children. It's because that's not what we're here to do. That's not what we signed up for. So, I mean, the conflict, as I see it, is it shouldn't be, us versus the kids, or the users, the adult users versus the younger users. It should be the Horizon community working with Facebook, hopefully, or Facebook figuring out their solution, or moderating it. I think that there is a lot of value if you look at programs that do like Minecraft for kids, that are like base coding, stuff like that. I look at Horizon. I can see so many kids getting into scripting and coding and video games and world building, using the platform. It's such a great platform. It's so easy to use and easy to teach, that I think that Horizon could be a great platform for kids. I think that having a user created solution on the Horizon platform is not the answer. Number one, it's not our responsibility, or it shouldn't be. I mean, I think that it takes a village. I think that as adults, many of us feel a responsibility to take care of kids and to make sure that they're okay and that they're safe. I think that any user based solution is not going to force global adoption, and I think that needs to come from Facebook. In this situation, obviously, like, there's no intent from the younger party to be disruptive. They're just here
Right.
to see what's going on and
Exactly.
experience Horizon. But
Right.
now, like my video footage is now no good for this clip. But but what can you do, right?
I put a still in. No big
There's
deal.
there yeah, there's still private sessions, but
Yeah.
it's you know, we do want people, we do want audience members. We do want
Right.
people to feel like they
Exactly.
can come be a part of the conversation.
Right.
And I think, I think that it needs to be a Facebook generated solution.
I agree. That's why I
I know
stopped
that this
putting
is,
in.
it's a,
Yeah. That's why I stopped putting in
yeah,
my, send the person to take a walk script.
yeah,
Because, I'm like, you know what? Yes, I can do this. Yes, this is something I can use, but I'd rather
yeah,
take the minute or two and just talk
right.
and, you know, because I found most people, especially children, can be talked to and explained, and they're wonderful. It's perfect.
Yeah,
Then there are those who just you don't really have an option but to hit the report button, and that's sad. That makes me sad
yeah,
when I have to do it, but I do. I will, I
yeah.
will do it.
And this is a conversation that's been ongoing since
Yeah,
since March, or before then,
right,
where it's certainly a lot more prevalent now, than it was, but it's I have seen people, they just say block, 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 block. I've seen people say I have a magic wand that will disappear anybody I hit with it while I'm holding it.
yep,
I've
guilty.
seen, yeah, well, like what, that's one of the strengths of Horizon is its inclusivity. And
Right,
that's what people want. People want to
right.
be inclusive. They want everybody to come see their worlds. They want everyone to be
Mm-hmm.
there. But we need to focus on safety. We need to focus on,
Yeah,
not just for liability reasons, as an
right,
adult, but for children. I'm happy to say that I've never met anybody that I think would be an issue. That I was like, I've never met anybody that I was like, man, this person cannot be around children in Horizon.
oh, you're
Thank
lucky.
God. Yeah. Oh.
Twice.
But
Twice,
twice. Oh, geez.
two big ones. Oh yeah, in
Uh
Horizon and one
oh.
and a really big one in venues. Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Wow. But
yep,
yeah, but that's the thing, right?
yeah,
As in this big wide world of on the World Wide Web, you want to
yeah,
make sure that that everybody's operating safely, that we're all being
right,
honest with each other, that we're empathizing with each other, that we're all trying, making a good faith effort to communicate.
right.
Um, so no, thank you. Okay. So as we're having this conversation,
Right,
there's right, and it's like we we're not in a position of authority
right,
because we're not their parents, we're not
right.
administrators, we're not um you know like I know that you've got a little guy here. Let me get that.
Okay. The interesting thing is, I
All
did
right.
put on the sign that this is recording.
I know. Well, but like that one child didn't sound like they were old enough to read, honestly. And
No,
that's not a
no,
comment on
no, of course not.
development or anything like that, but it's they sounded extremely young, maybe 4 or 5 at the oldest, really.
Yeah,
um and it's like they're not, they see the sign, but I my nephew, when he was younger, he got like a new video game, but the video game, while the gameplay itself was appropriate for children,
Mm-hmm.
he couldn't read. So it was like he was frustrated by it because he didn't know what he needed to be doing.
Right.
Understandably so. So he
Right.
never played it. And I think that, now that he's older and, he does have those reading comprehension skills, he has played it and enjoyed it, but it's one of those things where, as legitimate Horizon users, right,
Mm-hmm.
who, we're using the space to in publicly to bring community, to promote discussion, to promote positivity, and that's what is going to drive the platform, right?
Right.
If everybody has their own private worlds and doesn't invite anybody in, I'm not really sure how Facebook's going to keep it going. I think it's the events and it's the
Yeah.
podcasts and the videos and that really keep it going. And so it's so funny that happened. I'm kind of glad that it did at the time that it
Right.
did. I mean, you couldn't have, did you hire those children?
No, no, but boy, would it have been amazing if I had.
Right. What planning?
And I saved that
So
for the end of this, and I was like, yeah, okay, because I thought kids would come in at some point, but I honestly didn't think they'd actually come.
man, what timing. But I mean, perfect example. I think that the way that you handled it was very mature. I think that it had a lot of empathy. I think that it had, I think you're following the axioms when you're trying to deal with it, right? But
And then
unfortunately, right?
it feels disingenuous to me though. And the reason why I say that is because part of me wants to just stop everything I'm doing and
Yeah.
And actually engage the children by saying, okay, now this is how you go to this other world and play a game, because this isn't really a game world. But on the other hand, it's like I don't want to shoo them away and say, okay, now you got to go somewhere else. Because like you said, we want them to be inclusive spaces, and I would love for them to see how a podcast is done, so that they could learn something. Even at the age of 6, my daughter she's 7 now, but she knows what podcasts are, and she sometimes does them with me. So it's like,
yeah, sure.
I want the children to engage appropriately. And then I just wish the parents were more involved.
Again, that's not something that either of us or any user is, has the power to do or to enforce or moderate. It's gotta come from, it's gotta come from the provider. I mean, you talk about, the Horizon platform. In that situation, what were our options? We, option one, ask, talk to the children politely and say, hey, like, if you want to be here, that's fine. But like, these are the rules for the space. And I think that you explained it beautifully. You weren't patronizing. I think that you, we, like you said, we stopped immediately what we were doing, and we acknowledged their presence, and you talked to them and said, this is what we're doing. And it's not like, I mean, you used it, you use vocabulary that makes sense, especially when we're not sure how old they are, but certainly too young to be on the internet unmonitored, in my opinion.
My opinion as well.
Yeah. But then what's part two? Now we're in a position where we're forced out. I mean, we had John earlier. I think we had another player
Adult.
was observing. Yeah. And was watching respectfully and was here for the conversation, and we can't do that now. So and then the kids didn't really understand what the world was for. It's not a game world. It's for discussion. And and chatting.
Right.
And if that's what they're in the mood for, that's great. But they were, they're moving around, they're picking things up, they're asking questions, which is good. Like those are kid things. It's not bad for them to do that. It's not
Right.
wrong
Exactly.
for them to do that, but it puts us into conflict. But we're a lot of the time, even if the kids want to be, even, I would say most kids that I've met are pretty honest, and when they're not, it's pretty obvious. They do want to be here. They're not looking to create conflict. They're here to
Right.
explore, but they're not able to,
Right.
like they're not able to, at least for long periods of time. I think that the first child that came in, we stopped, you explained to them what was going on and what the rules of the room were, and they sat down for about 60 seconds and then started running around again.
Right.
And again, that's a kid thing. It's not wrong for them to be like that. That's just how they
Right.
are. They're not old enough to not be like that yet. And that's part of being a parent or a role model or a teacher or whatever, to help grow children.
Right.
And, hopefully even as a stranger, you know, being patient with them and trying to explain, that's part of that process. But it's not, you can't just snap your fingers and,
Right.
have a 5-year-old all of a sudden be like, ah, yes, I understand all of social intricacies now and will
Right.
abide
No,
by
of course
them.
not. No, of course not.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating. And my only other option was to report them. And I
Right.
don't want to report them, but it's like
And
if
now you're the bad guy when you do,
right.
because you feel bad, right? Because
Yeah.
reporting it has an inherent negative connotation. So when you
Right.
do report someone, as legitimate as it is, and honestly, I'm not someone, I don't do a lot of reporting. I don't spend a whole lot of time in the plaza. I don't when I do have time, I'm typically working on creating worlds, or I'm going to an event that's being thrown by somebody that I know.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so I can't say that I block people very often, but I it's hard for me to block somebody who, when their crime is
Being who they are.
existing in the world,
Yeah.
you know, like,
Yeah.
I'm like, man, that kid isn't old enough to read the terms and conditions like of
No.
being on Facebook. That was somebody else who was supposed to explain to them that this program was not for them, that somebody should have
Right.
put child, the locks on it or whatever, or they
Right.
shouldn't be allowing them to use it unsupervised. And it puts the kid in a tough situation, because I feel bad. I mean, we came to a private session. Not only do I feel bad because other adults can't come participate, and that we were interrupted and had to do that. Although
Mm.
in this one scenario, it was actually perfect timing, and like I think it was fine that it happened, because it was
Right.
helped
And I'll just
stimulate the
edit out
discussion.
and I'll just edit out the person's name tag and their voice
Yeah.
and post it so that people can see exactly what we're going through.
Right. And
You
it's,
know?
but I feel bad for the kids because we're not really adults in a position who are
To help them.
responsible
Yeah.
for them. That, they don't know who we are. They don't
Right.
know. And then when they come to ask us questions and we're like, oh, man, like, hey, like, we're doing a podcast. Can you please go mute your mic and sit over there?
Hmm.
And like, obviously they're not getting it, or they, like, they're, it's not the dissonance between, oh, these are real people, I need to respect them,
Right.
isn't quite there yet. It sucks because it feels like we abandoned that
Right.
instance, and now they're like,
Exactly.
well, those people weren't fun, they didn't want to interact with us, they didn't want to
Right.
teach us about the world, they didn't want, and it's not that we don't want to do that, it's just that
Right.
it wasn't the appropriate time for it, and it's not our responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
And when, of course, when you have time, and when there's when there is an opportunity for that, like you said, in an appropriate setting, I think that Horizon is going to be an incredible teaching aid, not
I
just
agree.
for scripting and whatever, but just in general, like being able
Yes.
to like walk kids through like and have them build a coliseum in Horizon, or
Yeah.
just like demonstrate like different monuments and like line them up next
Mm-hmm.
to each other to scale, or just like little really easy little things like that that you can do in 2D. But I mean, it's one thing to see it on a poster and another thing to stand
To
next to it.
stand.
And I
It
know that there are a
is.
lot of other like educational apps and stuff like that on Oculus, not
Right.
in Horizon, but on Oculus in general, that
Right.
they could be taken advantage of, that are built for children,
Right. I
that are built
agree.
for students.
Yep.
Um, and I think that a kids version of
Mm-hmm.
Horizon to separate the populations until they're old enough, it's one of those things where if the issue is that there's so many people doing it that you can't moderate it, and of course I'm not like a corporate lawyer, so I can't, I don't know the viability of this, but it feels like to me that the easiest solution is like, okay, well, they're going to break the rules, and that puts us in a liable state because we can't keep up with moderation, or we won't moderate it because we need to sell headsets. To me, the easiest thing is, hey, set up a second instance of it, make
Right.
it the kids Horizon, have
Mm-hmm.
a kids account that's linked to the headset so it can filter apps, kind of like how you have like the YouTube kids,
Right.
versus
The
regular YouTube.
the problem is adults
That would,
getting into the kids area, and this brings a whole other can of worms that I'm very familiar with, and because once you
yeah.
designate
Well,
something
the
as a
answer to
kid
that,
space, then you get adults that are nefarious that will go into those spaces one
yeah.
way or another, and that gets even scarier. So at least right
Well, I
now,
think that,
like when I saw the guy
yeah,
with the word, I'm not going to say it because it's that bad, but
right,
anatomy and what they want to do with said anatomy basically for their user tag.
right.
And then the comment that was made to me afterwards with that user tag um, was exactly why I don't want a kid's space. And I think that's what Mark Zuckerberg was going towards as well. But that means we definitely need to have moderators up in the sky, or, or us even without manually creating it ourselves, that says, if this person's doing that, remove them from world. Just them
But
providing
then,
that
but
tool.
yeah, I mean, you either have to filter those users out, or
Mm-hmm.
you have to put them somewhere else. And
Yeah.
I agree with you that there are certainly kid spaces that adults, bad people will
Right.
try to insert themselves into. And I think that that's an absolutely valid point. I think that having safeguards in place, you know, that needs to
Right.
that needs to be there.
I
Um,
agree.
I don't I don't know what the perfect answer is, but I
No.
think a good step one is better moderation from
Yeah,
Facebook,
definitely. Yeah.
and to not put the weight of the issue on the user base.
I agree.
That's I think what is upsetting the
Right.
community, because the
Yeah.
community is kind of trying to come up with like these crazy scripts about how to like figure out how to filter out these users while still being inclusive to everybody,
Right.
and without those tools being able to be misused to be exclusive,
Right.
and then distribute that to people, and then make
Yep.
sure like then apply it to every world. Well, now your world needs 10% in scripting just to filter out user. It's just,
Exactly.
it's an
Exactly.
issue.
It is.
It's a huge issue. And putting that, yeah, I guess my opinion on the matter is that putting that responsibility on the Horizon user base, it's unfair to
Mm-hmm.
everybody involved, the users, the kids. And I think that Facebook is putting themselves in a precarious position,
Yeah.
um,
I agree.
It's going to be a lot easier to find a solution now while we're in beta than it is when we're not.
I totally agree. Well, it's been wonderful having you here today, and what a wonderful conversation. I couldn't have asked for
sure
anything better. So thank you so much, and forgive my dog
my
barking.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. That's all right.
I'll give you 5.
That's all right.
And
nice.
I'll see you again soon, Habitor. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Flutter. See ya.